Hello and welcome to today's Confessions of a Global Changemaker show. I am so excited to introduce you to this incredible man. I learned about reluctant leadership a couple of years ago whilst 5,500 feet in the mountains of San Diego, learning about how the wolves really step into their leadership role. And the wolf doesn't select itself as a leader. It's actually the leader of the pack is a reluctant leader. And Mark and I were talking about this and how this is really reflected in not only your life, but in the workplace, in your business. And I'm sure that there's a part of you hiding in there somewhere, or maybe it's a bit more obvious, that is reluctant to really get out there and lead in the way that you could be shining. So I wanted to bring this amazing man to you today. Let's delve into some of his incredible knowledge about what is it to be a reluctant leader. And if you're a reluctant leader, how do you really step into that bigger zone of yourself? Mark, hello and welcome to today's show.
Hello, Sammy. Thank you for inviting me. I'm looking forward to it.
Well, this could go anywhere, and welcome to those of you that are joining us now, and to those of you watching the replay, welcome to you too. Come and say hi and tag me in so that we can come and answer any questions that you have as we go through today. So Mark, what does it mean to be a reluctant leader?
That's a good question. Well, the reason I refer to the reluctant leader is that I think a lot of people end up in that leadership position, not really wanting it, not really seeking it. And it's definitely my story. I joined a family retail business straight from school, and it wasn't until I'd been sort of in charge for about five or 6 years that I realized actually I'm not really feeling it. I'm not really wanting to be in charge here. The place I'd preferred to be was more part of the team, innovating, bringing new ideas in, and not really being the person that's actually influencing others. And it's the reason why I spend a lot of time working with motivation as something which I use and identify. And once you identify what motivates you, it can help you make better decisions for your business and your career.
Well, I mean, I know what it means to be a reluctant leader. How many of you watching this now kind of fell into starting your own business, or like me, was made redundant? There was no work, there was no job. And so you're then in that position of, okay, well, I'm going to claim ownership of my life. I'm going to be earning my money for me. I'm going to be my boss. How many of you like stepped into that position and then found yourself building a team, or found yourself hiring outsourcers, and then you're in a totally different role then, aren't you? You're in a completely different mindset position. Now, not only are you managing yourself, but you're managing others as well. Is that a key issue that you find, Mark, with the people that you're working with? Is that kind of all of a sudden they're building a team and they're having to manage people, and they haven't even stepped into their own claiming of their role yet, and now they're managing other people in different roles? Like, do you find that?
Absolutely right. And most people don't start a business because they want to lead a team. They start a business around a passion. They're good at something, or they've got a passion around something, and they want to develop it and make more of or there might be something that really annoys them and they want to fix something like that. But it's only comes with, if that business is successful, then ultimately you need people to help you. And that's when that leadership come management role starts to evolve. You don't really see it. It's almost a bit like the swamp thing, where it sort of creeps up on you, and the next minute it's all of a sudden you feel as if you're drowning in this responsibility. And it's where I felt very much like that in many occasions when I had sort of 40 odd staff to think about. I put myself last in so many situations, and that's the wrong thing to do. First of all, you've got to be put yourself first, fix your oxygen mask before everybody else is that scenario, making sure you're the most motivated person in the team so that you can then get the most out of your team. But what I see quite often is it's the opposite way around, that you can be concentrating too much on your team and not enough on yourself. But it's actually really about getting a balance. It's about understanding the balance between challenge and support that you need to think about when it comes to a team.
And I would say that every single thing that you've just talked about there is essential when building a tribe. when building a community. So for all of you entrepreneurs who are watching this right now, like, give me a hashtag tribe. If you're building a tribe, if you're on a mission to build a community, if you're trying to grow a Facebook group, or, you've got social media following and you're wanting to grow your list, if you're wanting to do that, then there's also that element of, when each and every single thing that you just talked about there is, it's not just when you're leading a team, when you're leading a tribe as well. You also have to step up into that role. What was really interesting was, whilst filming that documentary in San Diego, the Wolf Connection that we were talking about, I really got an insight into all of the other leaders that I was there with. They'd chosen, there were 20 of us, plus the film crew. And I remember Teo, the owner of the Wolf Connection, and he kind of took us through the wolf pack and how the alpha is a reluctant leader. Like, it's kind of, it just happens. And then you got the beta, and then you got the tracker, and he was describing the whole wolf pack. And it's fascinating how they just exist that way. There's no masterclasses for them. There's no webinars that they can join. It's just nature. They just fall into that role. And what was interesting was when he asked everybody there, out of all of you here, how many of you would consider yourself to be a reluctant leader? 100% of our hands went up around there. We're all running global organizations and building big stuff. And, not all of us have team. Not all of us have team.
I mean, it's not really, it's not just about the team. It's about actually what motivates us. That's the key. And I would hazard to guess that most people that are listening to this will be more motivated by freedom and doing the things in an autonomous way, rather than actually being part of a pack as such, or a part of a team.
Yeah.
And there's lies the problem, in that, if we are motivated for freedom, what we realize is the more responsibility we take on actually takes away that freedom. And that's what's going on. It's like almost like a fight that goes on within us, that we know that we've got to take responsibility, but we don't really want it, because we know that it takes away our freedom.
That's a really good point. I can totally associate with that. How many of you watching this can totally associate with that as well? I think, as you say, when we go into starting our own business, or when we go into the world of entrepreneurship, we're not necessarily thinking about building a team. We're just thinking about, at the beginning, serving, making an impact. How do you make an income doing what I love? Like, there's all those questions that go on. But then as you start to build your business, then the weight of the responsibility can become massive. Like, what are some of the kind of stories that you have around how being that reluctant leader can debilitate you, but also liberate you when you step into the kind of techniques that you're talking about?
Yeah, well, that's what I tried to talk about it in a positive way, because there's lots of things that come out of leading a team that are really positive. But what we see it as something negative, and most people have had a bad experience, haven't they? They've had a bad experience of a boss or someone that's actually not shown them the right way to lead a team. And what I talk about when at Reluctant Leaders, there's two things going on. Firstly, do you want to be in charge? And if you do, that's great. And if you don't, we just got to worry about how much time you spend managing others, because if it's out of balance, that's when you'll find that your energy levels are being sapped. But the other side is actually understanding the three principles of leading any team. And that's firstly mindset, making sure you've got the right mindset. And that mindset is about that sort of challenge and support, and getting that on a even keel, making sure that you're not too challenging or too supportive. And then thinking about the process you use, and then ultimately the skills you use at each point in that process. So I break it down into those three things, which then makes it into something that you can then repeat and use as a model, as opposed to, like, it's a bit like leadership, but like marketing. Marketing is a massive subject, but what we need, and that's what we're always looking for, is people to help us to actually give us a model to work to with respect to marketing ourselves. So it's very much the same with leadership. If you've got a model to work to, then you can make sure that you stick to it, and then know when things go wrong, you then can adapt and go back to the previous step in that process.
So talk us through your journey then, because if you were in that position, so you've joined the family business, you're now taking on more responsibility. Maybe you didn't have a vision for all of that, and you've kind of fallen into it. So you get where you are. I'm assuming that you either bring in a training company or you hire somebody to then work with you, or not. Like, what was the journey? Like, how did you realize that you were a reluctant leader, and how did you change things?
Well, there's two interesting things there. Firstly, there was no training company. I was basically just, anyone on this call listening to this that's had anything to do with a family business will realize in most cases, you're just expected to take the next step and fall into that role. And in some respects, that happens in other businesses as well. It's not just family businesses, but that didn't happen, and that was part of the reason. I was never shown the right way and what leadership was really about, and I had to sort of wing it for such a long time, and that was an issue. But going back to your point about vision, I think what I've realized now is that when my dad stepped away and he actually started another business, a video rental business, which obviously that's an interesting situation thinking about now. There's no video shops around, so
Right.
What happened? But actually was very successful for a long time. But what we should have done, me and my brothers, was actually re-established a new vision, because my dad obviously started the business with a vision. And when we took over, then we should have sat down and said, well, what's our new vision, and what are we going to do differently, and what are we going to stay the same? It's not about changing everything, obviously. But vision is really, really important. It's one of the things I spend a lot of time with my clients, is establishing what the vision is. Where are you going? What is it you want to do? And not about just what. How do you want to do it? What are your values? What's important to you? And also, why are you doing this? Ultimately, what are you doing it for? Over and above making a profit, because obviously a business makes a profit. That's an outcome. But what we actually want to build into a business is some of our why, and what is it that we're doing this for, so that we can actually connect to that. And the most important time, and or the time when it shows up more than anything, is when we're going through times like the moment, when we've got a hell of a lot of challenge going on. We can fall back on, well, we know why we're doing this. We just make sure that we carry on doing the right way, the way we set out, and everything will be fine. It's when you haven't got a vision and you don't know why, that's when things start really come off the rails, and it becomes a challenge to keep things moving forward.
Yeah, and that's when you got to really tap into that inner resilience then, haven't you? And that's not something that every thought leader is trained to have or to do. I mean, gosh, the amount of mistakes I've made by default, not by design. So you don't know what you don't know till you know it, do you? You work with companies to ensure that they do know what they need to know, and that if there's a train coming, there's the train, and I'm letting you know that it's on its way because you've been through it. So not only have you got the experience that you can go in and mentor them, but then you can also coach them through the process as well. What would be like an ideal client for you? Who is it that you work with most?
They tend to be business owners that have got to that point when they've got a team around them and it's sort of crept up on them, and they realize that they need to adapt in some way. They don't quite know what they need to do. Or there might be a company director in a similar scenario where they've got a team and they're trying to work also with the fellow directors in that scenario to get the best out of that team and also the overall business. So that's the typical scenario what I help with. And then help them with what I've just sort of explained about firstly understanding what motivates them and their behavioral styles, and then think about, well, okay, we need to think about how are you leading the team and what are you actually basing everything on. And once you get to that level and you've really sussed out, right, what's this business about, where is it going, what do you want to achieve, you can then start building from that point.
But these are all key things, guys and girls watching this now or listening to the show, these are things that you don't have to be a bigger business to start thinking about this. You need to start thinking about this as early on as possible, because if your business does grow, fortunately, by accident rather than by design, you don't want to have to go back to the beginning and do all of this. I can tell you a really, really great example of why you don't want to just let everything unfold and just let it flow without a vision, without that reason why, without the values, without all the things that really are the culture of the organization. We had a company that was referred to us. Gosh, this must be about 9 years ago. This was when we had our big design, branding, marketing, and web agency. And this company was referred to us. I went down to see the director, and he was saying that, that they've got to rebrand. And I said to him, why do you feel like you need to rebrand? It looks to me like you've got a great brand, and me, like I won't sell someone rebranding if I don't think they need it. So we're having this conversation, and he says, well, the image of the company isn't what we really want it to be. We're going in a new direction, and our customers, we're not exactly attracting the customers that we want, and we've had a few complaints, so we need to start looking in a different area. And that should have been a red light to me there and then, but I wasn't anywhere near as experienced as I am now. And so I said to him, well, look, I want all of the directors in this brand strategy meeting. Like, I want all of you for half a day in one room so that we can make sure that everyone is singing from the same hymn sheet. I don't want to be working with just the director. I want everybody. I want the culture of the organization. Who are your thought leaders in the organization? That's who we need to be working with. 5 of them turn up. I work with them for half a day, and we were going through values. And I never thought that something as simple as values would cause the biggest stink ever. But at one point, 2 of these directors were literally grabbing each other around the throat across the boardroom table. And I'm stood there thinking, this isn't a branding issue. I need to bring someone like Mark in. And actually, after that meeting, I said, you haven't got a branding issue. You've got a much bigger issue than that. Your whole team. I think there's a swan next door. Sorry, there was lots and lots of flapping then. It's like, what the hell is that? And we have swans and little babies and things everywhere. So yes, use the noise if this starts quacking or anything. We're right in the middle of a marina, so anything could happen. So these 2, I just said, like, you need bigger help than this. You've got to get all of your directors singing from the same hymn sheet. And like, how can you expect to build a brand that really stands for something when none of you really know what you stand for? Like, how can you put anything to that? Have you worked with like anyone like that?
Absolutely. And you know what, the most important thing is that you've got to bring that to the surface, because it's been there probably bubbling away and people not really understanding themselves. But what's really close to our values is that it's that motivational piece is the thing that gets us up in the morning. And we're hardwired to do the things that motivate us, and also the things that don't motivate us can become almost an adversity against, and that's where we get those conflicts within teams, because we're very much we have a way, each one of us, of how we look at things, how we decide whether it's right for us, and we have a way of thinking, well, like myself, I know that the number one thing that I want to do is make a difference. So when I'm deciding on what I'm going to do, will this make a difference? Like coming on here, will it make a difference? Well, hopefully someone will hear what I talk about and they'll inspire them to do something. So yes, ticks the box there. The next thing I want to do is be creative. So I want to be doing some things that innovative, bring new ideas and out there. And also I want to do things my way. So that freedom, autonomy is important for me. So I'm well aware of that. And but the trouble is I can work with somebody, I could be working in a team which those 3 things might be the least important to them, and that's the problem, isn't it? Where they're filtering things completely different to me. They then could be looking at an opportunity more on how much money am I going to make, how much, what does this allow me to show my expertise, whatever. But it's very different. It could be very different the way I look at things, and that's the problem. But also it's also the opportunity, because once you understand that you don't want a team that's all motivated in the same way, because that, especially when you get a bunch of creatives. I mean, I've worked with a bunch of creatives and all they want to do is come up with more and more ideas, but nothing ever happens. Nothing ever sort of comes to fruition, which is very frustrating. So you want a mixture. But what you need to do is identify the things that motivate you and make sure those things are being met and they've been used in a way that the business is actually getting some value from them. That's the key. And it's very much, you know, what you've described with the values piece, understanding that. And if you can use it in a positive way, then it's a win-win.
Yeah. Yeah. And you know, for those of you that are entrepreneurs and business owners and you're not in a part of a team, again, when it comes to really thinking about you and all of these missing pieces, right? Now, how many of you are running the business on your own? If you could put it in the comments here. Now, I might not see your comments straight away because we are going live via 5 channels here. So I think if you're leaving comments on my Sammy Blundell official page, we will be able to see them because they come through the comments thread here. But I might not see them until after the show, but I'd still love to know your answer to it. Like, how many of you are working on your own? How many of you are building your dream without a team? And the reason I ask that is because we have to wear so many hats, don't we? And then you get the opportunity to bring on your first team member. And then you've got somebody else you're dividing that with, and then maybe another team member. And then you've got your little team that you're starting to build that dream with. Mark, when there's so many hats to wear as a solopreneur, you know, I've heard people say, and I'm not sure I agree with this, but I've heard people say, well, you've got to find out what your weaknesses are and turn them into strengths. I'm not sure that we need to do that. There's somebody else that's got that strength. But as a solopreneur, you maybe haven't got the money and the resources to hire that strength. So what would your advice be to those people who are in that position?
Actually, I did a blog post on this today. And what the blog post is about, we're all reluctant in one way or another. So in other words, what we're good at or what we're motivated to do, we will be taking action around without even thinking about it. The things we've got to be aware of are the things that we're not motivated by, but are crucial to our business succeeding or moving forward and growing. And those typically are marketing. So we're not motivated to promote ourselves. So ultimately, if it's the thing that least motivates you, it's probably the thing that you're spending least time doing. And ultimately, it's always last in the pecking order and probably never gets done. So it's sort of identifying the things that you're not good at or don't want to do and putting some actions into place. Yeah. Now, if you can afford to, you get someone else to do it. If you can't afford to, you just have to put a plan in place to make sure you do it. Because if you don't, ultimately, it's going to be your Achilles heel when it comes to your business.
Yeah, it certainly will. And I think it's important as well that, you know, you start to really look at what those weaknesses are, because if you can identify them, then they can be the first things that you do release. I tend to find, I don't know if you find this, Mark, and I've done it. That's why I've found this myself, is that when I started to grow my first business back in 2002, so it'd be about 2003 that I started to hire a team. I remember hiring other people like me, and I hadn't worked out what those weaknesses were. So that's why I identify when you said, you know, people are trying to get things done, but then the whole team is a creative. And so I hired, my next hire was another creative, because I thought, oh, this would be great. They're going to release me from doing what I'm doing. But then my expectations of what they would do were beyond just being creative. And of course, it didn't work. You know, I mean, the company grew, but it was hard. It was really hard work to get it to grow. And it kept falling on me all the time. And actually, what I hadn't done, which I do now, is to map out, like I map out an organizational structure for every product that I create. Even now, if I'm going to create a mini course, I'll create an organizational structure on it and say, all right, so where are my responsibilities? What does the tech team need to do? Who does that tech team need to be? And who has each role to make sure that this is making the impact that it needs to have. So many people will just create an organizational structure for the business. I do it for each product, because each product's going to need different skills, different people in that team. And so, you know, I found out very early on that hiring people just like me was an issue. So if there's something that I'm getting involved in that means that I'm not the ambassador of the business, I'm not creating a product or making money or adding value, if there's anything outside of those things, I'm listing them all the time, and I'm thinking, right, the next thing that I'm going to outsource is that. So it's like this kind of, I suppose, like a shit list, really. It's like, let's get somebody who really knows what they're doing and loves that. They love the stuff that I hate. And then
and it could be as simple as just getting someone that's in charge of money. Just saying, right, you're in charge of making sure that we are charging the right price. We're chasing to make sure we get paid on time, and reconciling the bank account. Because again, with your, when you're working with a group of creatives, nobody will be wanting to do it. So the first thing you'd want to do is to do that, because ultimately most businesses fail on cash flow, not because they're unprofitable. It's cash flow that's probably sat in somebody else's account, which should be in theirs, and then ultimately it catches up with them. So that would be the one thing. Once you start growing, and you identify that, make sure you've got someone is actually taking care of the money. Seems obvious, but it quite often doesn't get done.
No, you've got to be looking after that, and I think, one of the biggest mistakes that I made was being so on top of that. And then, and I burned out big time. Literally, if the team went and bought a pint of milk, it went on the sheet, right? I knew everything that was going on in the business. And then when I burned out and almost had a heart attack, I walked away completely from that life. And so I then rejected that. So that was actually the first thing that I outsourced when I set up How to Build a Brand. And I was like, right, someone else has got to take care of that. I don't want anything to do with it. I don't want to look at it. If I see another cash flow forecast again in my life, it's going to be too soon. And I rejected it. And boy, did I regret that, because then I had no control over that. And I had no idea what was coming in. I was just selling. And I wasn't keeping control of the numbers. Well, it turned out neither were they, even though that was their responsibility. And so, in fact, a lot of the confessions show interviews that I've done. When I say to them, what's been one of your big confessions? At some point, they say it was not running my business like a business.
Yeah, and it absolutely happens all the time, doesn't it? Because we don't go into business for those reasons. We go in because we've got a passion around something, or we're good at something. It's all those other things that creep up on us, and suddenly realize, oh my God, I'm not paying enough attention to it. Then, like you just described, you pay too much attention to it, and then you don't do the things that allow your business to grow, and then you're sort of like this topsy-turvy sort of swing going up and down, and it's disconcerting, isn't it?
Hard work.
And if we spend too much time doing things that don't motivate us, though, ultimately that will lead to our burnout. And it sounds like a bit of that going on. If that you're spending too much of the time doing those things that really don't give you energy, ultimately all that does is deplete your energy, and then ultimately that stops you from doing. Because motivation is around, it's all about energy. If you're doing things that motivate you, you will get energy from it. If you're doing things that don't motivate you, you'll be depleting that energy, and ultimately it'll be. And if you get those two things wrong, in other words, you're not doing enough of what motivates you, and you're doing too much of what doesn't, you got a double whammy there, and you're not getting the energy, and you're spending time on things that actually depletes your energy. You can see what ultimately will happen.
I definitely, as you're saying it now, I'm kind of getting flashbacks of that time. And actually, I am a creative, and I was told that, the financial side of things is one of your weaknesses. You got to get good at that. And that's why I became obsessed at being good at that. But then I wasn't being creative, and I didn't have freedom because so you're absolutely right. It was taking me away from everything that was important to me, which is the impact side of things. And I'm a very social creature, but now, like, all I'm doing is managing a team and looking after numbers. That wasn't at all fulfilling my heart. So yes, I'm not surprised. Gosh, I learned so much about myself on these interviews all these years later after walking away from that business. But I don't want any of you watching or listening to this right now to go through that unnecessary journey that I went through, and the journeys that people are coming onto this show to share with you. It's because we want you to build that brand and have that life that you deserve and want to have without making the mistakes, right?
Can I just say something about mistakes, though? Can I just say something about that? Obviously, if you're entrepreneurial, then you've got to have a mindset around mistakes, and you've got to allow yourself to make some. Because ultimately you don't grow unless you've made some, and you're not pushing the boundaries enough. And really, ultimately, it's our attitude to that failure that actually determines what happens. And if you're able just to put it down as, you know, something that happened rather than a failure, I think failure is a bad thing to sort of associate with. Just say it's a learning experience, and I won't do that again, and move on from it, rather than, you know, dwelling on it, think I've made a mistake. And I see that happening a lot, in that people dwell on their mistakes too much. And I've just read a book by the Trunky guy that created the Trunky and all that he went through. I highly recommend reading it.
Oh, really?
And, you know, yeah, it's fascinating, really. And he's hopefully going to be on my podcast, and we're going to talk about resilience. And that is the key, knowing that, you know, all these setbacks are not fatal. Well, in a majority of the case, they're not fatal, but they're just learning experiences that you've got to allow yourself to learn from. And quite often, like he says in the book, that's where your biggest learnings are and where you grow the most. And if you don't ever make mistakes, then those opportunities never come along.
No, I completely agree. As I was going to say just before you started talking, I think that there are some mistakes that we have to make, but then there are other things that we can definitely learn from and say, how do I get there faster? I don't want to go through that whole maze that you went through. Here's where I want to be. How do I get there in the shortest amount of time? But, you know, with the experience and skills of you, like, because if I can employ you or hire you to come in and bring all of those years to me, then that's going to totally speed up my progress. And I don't have to go through those things. Out of your vast experience and all the years that you've been doing this, what is your confession? What is something that, you know, if you could do something again a different way, what one thing would that have been?
Well, I've mentioned the vision thing. That was a big thing that I realized that's what we should have done. But I think, if you go into auto sort of, if you're doing things automatically and not really thinking about why am I doing this, then those are more likely when things are going to go wrong. You've got to be connected to the things that are important to you. And going back to this values and motivational piece again, but it's really important in that if you don't do that, then ultimately where you end up could possibly be where you don't want to be. That's the thing. We don't want to create a business that doesn't work for us, and it's so easy to let that happen. That, you know, if you've not thought about why you're doing something, when you end up in that place where you think, well, why did I end up here? And it's because you've not paid enough attention to those decisions you've made, and you haven't thought about the things that are important to you, to making sure that you're doing, again, making sure you're doing as much as possible that motivates you, and avoid as much as possible the things that don't. And if you can always consciously make those decisions based on that, then most of the time you're going to get it right. And I say you can't avoid doing all the things that don't motivate you. That's not realistic. But if you can consciously avoid doing too much of it and make sure that you do as much as possible that does motivate you, you will have more energy and you will be more successful. And that's the biggest learning, that I didn't pay enough attention to that. And there was times when I thought, do I really want to do this? And I did it for other people. I did it because somebody else told me I should do it. Well, ultimately, that's wasn't the right thing to do. And you know, we all learn the hard way, one way or the other. And that would be my biggest learning. My biggest mistake was that I didn't pay enough attention to that.
And how would you recognize that was happening again, if it were to happen again?
Well, I'm quite fortunate in that I've got a high awareness of this stuff now, because I spend my time working with it all the time. So understanding, firstly, behavior styles, which you might cover before, about, I use a 4-color model, which understanding the different types of behavioral style. That helps you firstly understand the impact you have on others, but it also helps you that you can then adapt to other people. So number one, make sure that you understand your behavior style and how it affects people, and vice versa. But then understand what motivates you. What is it that drives you? What gets you out of bed in the morning? If it's not money, then what is it? You know, and make sure those things are being fulfilled. You know, that's the thing. It's transformed the way I look at every decision I make. Is this taking me in the right direction?
Yeah.
You know, I might have banged on a lot about motivation, but it is so important. It's it's understanding what it is that drives you.
Yeah, I think it's also important that you have other people around you that are reflecting to you if you are going off track, because when we work on our own, and even when we work in a team to a certain extent, like I remember when we built our design agency, we got to a point where we didn't want to share certain things with the team. You know, when you first start the business and you're all in it together, that's, you know, everybody's excited and you go, but then you grow the business to a certain point and there's expectations that need to be met. There's a brand now, there's a reputation that has to be kept. You know, there's certain decisions that have to be made that you no longer want to take to your team. And then you get to a point where, or I certainly did, where I couldn't even talk to my business partner anymore because I didn't want to worry him, or I didn't want to frustrate him or bother him with things that, well, I thought, well, I've got to be strong. I've got to deal with this. And so I was taking on a lot of stress to try and remove stress from him. And actually it became this really lonely experience in a team that was, you know, a big team. And
I mean, that's the classic example of over support. You're giving far too much support. You're not looking after yourself. You're doing everything for what the team wants and what other people want, and not paying enough attention to yourself. And obviously, you felt it. You've been there, and you know what happens. So it's really important to make sure that you're looking after number one. It sounds selfish, but it's not. It's essential.
I do. I really wholeheartedly agree with that. And it's only through learning that lesson that I can sit here now, like 7 years later, and be able to say, oh yeah, I recognize that. I see you in my history. Let's not repeat that. When you are working with a client and you've gone through that, the whole experience of, you know, who are you, where do you want to be, the values, the vision, the mission, when you go through all of that, what would you say are some of the biggest learning curves that those business owners have as they really start to grow their business?
Well, I think what it boils down to is that they've been successful to a point. And the thing that I've got to get them to understand firstly is that what they know and what's got them to this point has been successful. But if you want to actually move to the next level, you need to understand other things. You've got to do things differently, because ultimately it's holding your business back by staying in this mindset, staying in the position of trying to remain the technical person within the business. You've got to understand that you have to lead the team, and with that, you've got to understand what the team needs from you. So the team wants from you a clear vision. It needs a balance of support and challenge from you. And you've got to be there, especially when you're in challenging times like we are at the moment. You've got to be there as a support, but also realizing that there's potential in everyone, and realizing that your role also is to get the potential out of everyone, and seeing it and telling people, finding their superpower, noticing it, making sure that they're using it. And I think you have to be selfless when you're in charge for team. You can't protect your position. The worst thing you could do when you're leading a business and leading a team is to protect your role and your job as such. If you're doing that, ultimately you're not growing the potential of your business or your team. You've got to be selfless, and that you want everyone to perform at their best. You want them to develop to the best they can be. And in some cases, that might be almost feel like you're doing yourself out and making yourself redundant. But that's ultimately where we want to be. Yes. That's where we need to be. You know, I talk to clients and say, look, ultimately, that's what you're trying to do, is make yourself redundant. Because firstly, it frees up your time. But ultimately, if you ever want to sell this business, you're massively increasing the value of your business, because people aren't going to buy you, are they? I mean, some people stick around. It never works. When they stay on after they've sold a business they made to another business, nobody wants to be there. So they're better off moving on quicker. So if you're not really the business isn't that dependent on you, you're going to get a better price, and actually you can walk away quicker, which is better for everyone. So that's what I'd say.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I know for those of you that are fairly new in your businesses, or you may be just starting out, or maybe you've been in business a long time and you've just decided you're going to follow your calling, and actually you're going to go in a totally different direction, like I did. I want you to really seriously consider what your exit strategy is going to be. Like, what is the vision for what you're building and who you're building it for? Because if you do have an exit strategy, in terms of, you might always want to be part of that business, but your exit strategy might be, actually, I just want to be the ambassador for this. I want to be the one that's speaking on stages. I want to be the personality for the business. I want that business to be running seamlessly without me. Then you've got to start thinking about that now, and you've got to act like that now. I remember one of my coaches, Andrew Priestley, saying to me, Sammy, what do you want this business to be worth, in 7 years from now? And I gave him a figure, and he went, ugh. He said, I want you to put a 0 on that. I said, what? He said, put a 0 on it. So you want me to build a business of 70 million? And he went, oh, come on. He said, you've already built a business over 7 million. So he said, like, you've just given me a number that's just ridiculous. You can create it. He said, but if you add a 0 to it, wouldn't you agree you're going to have to act very differently to the way you act now if you own a 70 million pound company? I said, yes. He said, okay, so what are some of the things you would need to be doing differently if you had a 70 million pound company? And I listed them all off, and he went, okay, so tell me in one word, what is it that stopped you from already being that 70 million pound company? Because you already know what you need to do. So what is it that stopped you? He said, in one word. And I was like, I know exactly what it is. And he said, okay, what is it? I said, gut. My gut instinct. I've followed the wrong path because I didn't follow my gut. I've taken the wrong people on because I didn't follow my gut. I've done things because I didn't follow my gut. And if I'd have followed my gut, then I probably would have been there. And he said, okay, so let's work on some of that, shall we? And there's so many lessons out there in business. For those of you that are watching this now, what would your word be? Mark, what would your word be?
Well, it's funny as you were saying that. I was thinking about, I thought you were going to say brave, actually, because we all need to be brave in some way. Because, if we're always doing the things we've already done, then we're never really pushing the boundaries, are we? So you need to be brave in that you're doing something that you've never done. And that's the way you push your boundaries, go out your comfort zone, and do things that you've never done. There's nothing like the feeling of doing something for the first ever time. Yeah. Because that's when you really feel out of your comfort zone, and you have to put yourself in those positions. If you don't, then you're not really pushing yourself. You're not really growing. And I don't know about you, but I find sometimes, what is it that it's going to take me out of that comfort zone? Sometimes, when you've got used to speaking and all those sort of things that used to be terrifying, let's face it, and anybody out there, listening to us thinking, oh my God, I couldn't do that. Yeah, you can do it. We can all do what we're doing now. There's nothing to it really. It's just about just practicing, starting, doing it, and ultimately you get better as you go by, as you get more used to it. But every time you got to think to yourself, or not every time, but you've got to think to yourself, how am I going to stretch myself and really learn something more about myself, so that I become that person, like you just said, that Andrew sort of said. He was challenging you there to be something that you've never been before. That's the thing, isn't it?
It is. Well, Mark, I'd love to give your details to everybody. So if anybody is thinking about just going in a different direction, or you have a team and you're thinking about how you're going to get to that next level, or you're thinking that you might in future build a team, you've got to start now. You've got to get your head into the right space and start now. Don't wait till you've got that team to start talking to the right person that can help you to really understand your dynamic in what you're doing, understand your personality, understand your behaviors, understand how all of those things impact on you and also your universe, because they impact on your customers. And then when you start bringing team in, you'll start bringing the right team in. As I said, I really learned the hard way. I remember when we got to 5 people in our business. So there was myself, my business partner, and we had another 3 people. So the first person that I got in was somebody just like me, a creative. Then the next person, we got an assistant in, and they were working on the business development side of things and PA type stuff. And then we got somebody else in, and we got to a point where we weren't in flow, and it was hard. It was really hard running the business. And I went to this networking event, and this person who I'd become quite good friends with, she said, I could come in and run a day of disc with all of you and just work out, where are the things that are working well in the business and where are the things that we need to work on. I said, brilliant. So she came in and we did the disc profiles, and I've done all kinds of other profiles since then, but this was a disc day. And I remember her doing this thing with the team. Well, 3 people in a team of 5 were high Ds. They were all directing everything. So it was just like that all the time. We couldn't get stuff done because there was always a reason why we couldn't do this, and that person, and so we had 3 high Ds. So they were very direct, very driven, but they weren't achieving anything because there were 3 of them that were trying to make decisions, and each one was trying to have the better decision. And then there was me. I can't remember what I was. I think, I'm an I. I'm innovative and supportive. I was like an IS or something. So I was very much on the support side, but totally innovative. And then we had
more people focused, I guess.
Totally people focused. And then we had Paul, who was completely support. Well, we had no one in the business that was a C, which is the conscientious, detail-focused person, right? So we're all running this business, and they're like, rah, going off, getting these clients in. I'm the innovator, and then you've got this support person who wasn't in a big role. He was just, at that time, he was like an intern in the business, and he was modeling me. I was training him up. And they said, you've got no C in the organization. Who is it that's actually focusing on the detail? We're like, looking at each other. No. And, we then made the mistake of going on a big kind of recruitment drive to get C's in the business. And we ended up with more C's than we did the others. So it's just making sure that, if you know where you're going and you know that vision and you've got a heart for what it is you're doing, I would just encourage that you get a conversation in with Mark before you start growing it, because, you can think that you're going in the right direction and be completely off track, or you could be going in the right direction, but then you could go too far in that direction. Then the company is out of balance. So it's just keeping flow, I think, is the biggest thing. So Mark, how could somebody get in contact with you if they want to have a chat? What ways can they interact and engage with you? I'll get them up on the screen.
Okay, so my website is thereluctantleader.academy, which is sort of a hub of everything that I do. So there's plenty of opportunities there to get in touch with me. Obviously, LinkedIn, plenty of stuff on there, and my Facebook. Again, the Reluctant Leader Academy Facebook page is where I put my stuff. Feel free to get in touch. Happy to give anybody any sort of advice if they're starting to go down that sort of route where they're growing a team. And it doesn't necessarily have to be team where you employ people. It's just as important to understand that the freelancers or what have you that you work with, to understand how you are, how they will complement you, but also challenge you. But don't fall into the trap that, like Sammy's just explained, is that get people like you all the time is the easy option. Be brave, and realize that you need people that are not like you.
Yeah.
And also, if you're going to get someone like you're a coach or a mentor, get them so that they're not like you. So someone that you look at and think they're so opposite to me, and they think that's really uncomfortable. That might be the best thing you ever did, was actually employ someone that's really not like you.
Yeah. Fabulous. Mark, thank you so much for your time today. Guys and girls, thank you for listening, and definitely go back and watch the replay and get all of the golden nuggets again. Mark, it's been a real pleasure to meet you. I met Mark at a Trainer Talk live event run by a dear friend of mine, Sharon Gaskin, who has a company called Trainer Talk, and you are part of the Trainer Talk community. And so it was a real pleasure to meet you on her live day when I was speaking at her event. And I look look forward to watching you really grow your business, Mark, and supporting you in that journey. So do keep us updated. What's happening in Mark's world? What's going on next? What's next for you?
Well, developing the brand. I've got an online course now, which I've got my first cohort going through on that. So teaching them the principles of leadership. That's exciting. That's something new. I've got a podcast, which you know about, and you're going to be a guest of mine in the future. So we're going to turn the tables, and I'm going to grill you for 30 minutes. No, it'd be good fun. So that's, marketing wise, that's, I do that. I've got a blog, which I do obviously regularly, and developing and connecting with more people that, want to grow their business and see that what's going to hold them back is their ability to grow a team. And if you can get that sorted, ultimately, it will not only help you in your business, it will help you in many situations, understanding, firstly, the mindset. It works in many situations, and not least when you're at home with your family. Understanding, come from a place of high support and challenge. It would transform the way you interact with your partner, your kids, your parents, all that sort of stuff.
Really will help you. Your family is a team too.
Absolutely, yeah, absolutely, and don't ever forget that, because it's treat them as a team. And lead them when you need to, because there's lots to be had from leading your domestic team.
Right, and especially if you're building your business, and that team that you have at home, they don't always get to be part of the stuff that you're doing, and so that it's about including everybody, isn't it? It's about everyone singing from the same hymn sheet.
Absolutely.
Well, Mark, I could talk to you all day, but our time is up. We've got like 50 minutes into the interview now. We've got a little bit over. So thank you so much for your heart and all of the amazing little tips and tools and things that you've shared as we've gone through today. I'll definitely be looking at that book. That'll be fantastic. And we'll look forward to watching the Reluctant Leader Academy really flourishing and supporting all of those business owners all over the world who actually really want to build their dream with a team. I think that the teamwork really does make the dream work. That's not some corny catchphrase. I think it is true. And if we can step outside of ourselves and realize that actually by firing ourselves, we actually get to build something that makes way more income and way more impact than if we try and hold on to it and do it all on our own. So do not try and do that. And if you're going through that right now, please reach out and reach out to Mark, reach out to myself. We are here to love, serve and support you. So Mark, thank you once again. Guys and girls, we will be back tomorrow. Who have I got in the hot seat tomorrow? Oh, we have Chris Gordon tomorrow. And then Wednesday, we got Cheyenne Fremantle-Smith. We've got Carrie Eddings, the blondepreneur, on Thursday. And then on Friday, Gary Gorman. Some of those people I think you will know.
I do indeed.
So we've got a great lineup for you this week. Take care. Have an amazing evening. And I'll look forward to seeing you same time, same place tomorrow. Mwah. Big love. Take care. Bye.
Bye.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.